5F is about credit cards, and I've got this starting off with a bunch of terminology because this section has a few terminology related questions in the homework. There are still computation ones like there usually are, but there are a handful of terminology ones sprinkled in. And the Newton notes add in a couple of extra terms on top of these. I think APR is defined, but I figured that one we already had, and it kind of naturally shows up in the computational questions in this section too. And then there were things about like rewards programs with credit cards, which basically just said that they exist. And if you transfer your balance, I remember when I ran the homework a couple of times, there was a question about is there a fee if you transfer your balance? So, like if you have a balance on one credit card and you transfer it to a different credit card, like maybe you're trying to get a better APR or something, then yeah, there's going to be a fee there. But these were the big ones, so I figured we could just kind of focus on these, and I thought would be good. So a credit score, which I guess if you're using the traditional credit score format, would be 300 to 850, and there are variations on that now, but I guess that's sort of the traditional one, where bigger is better, right? Ideally, you want to have a higher credit score rather than a lower one. And what the credit score is supposed to indicate is how likely you are to pay off your debts. So, bigger being better, and if you have a higher credit score, then if you're considered to be more likely to pay off your debts, then that's how you can take out bigger loans, right? And that's why you have to establish credit first before you can like take out a mortgage, right? Like it's a big loan, but that's basically how it goes, right? Let's see, other stuff, the credit limit, so that's the maximum amount that you could put on a credit card, balance being the amount owed. Billing cycles for credit cards typically are going to be monthly. I've never really seen one that wasn't, although I guess you could make one, right? I mean, like it's not hard to conceive of, but that seems like that's kind of a rare occurrence, a credit card that has a billing cycle that's not every month. When you have the billing cycle, basically what you get billed for would be purchases made during the billing cycle, so since the last billing, and then if there's any outstanding balance. So like in the previous billing cycle, if it's not paid all the way down to zero, so if there's some balance that gets carried forward, that's still going to be there, plus any accumulated interest on that carried forward balance. Let's see, then the minimum payment, just being the amount that's listed on a bill, where if you pay at least this much, you'll remain in good standing with a creditor. The minimum payment varies a lot too. If you just open an account and don't have a credit history, then there's some default setting for it. But then depending on like what your credit history is, and things like if you've run up a whole bunch of debt and then paid it all the way back down to zero, then your minimum payment a lot of times just kind of goes to zero unless all of a sudden you have like some enormous balance. So the minimum payment can fluctuate, and it depends on basically it depends on your credit score and what your outstanding balance is, right? It's kind of a combination of those things. And then the last thing, the grace period, how much time you would have to pay off the full balance of a credit card before interest is calculated and added on top. All right, now getting into the computational stuff. There are basically two big things. The average daily balance, which you can see that one at the bottom of the screen right now, and how to calculate interest, which that involves the average daily balance, so we got to do this one first. So in order to get the average daily balance for a billing cycle or a billing period, it essentially, the definition is sort of what you would think it would be. It would be where you would just average the individual daily balances in that billing period. So you'll have a daily balance for every day, and depending on if it's a 30-day month or a 31-day month or a 28-day month, then you would just divide by however many days are in the month, and that's going to be your average daily balance. So the way that they're phrased in the homework is like this first example, and the thing to watch out for is basically the way that you count the number of days, just to make sure you don't get off by one, because it's really easy to do when it's in this format. So I mimicked the format of the homework just so I could point that out. All right, so if that table shows the transactions for a credit account during the month of October, all right, so it's a 31-day month, right? That matters because that means we're going to have to divide by 31 at the end of this thing. And so then we want to figure out the average daily balance. Okay, so notice where the changes are. So day one, there's this carried forward balance of 7,100. And then day 11, there's a transaction. Day 26, there's a transaction. So the first 10 days, it's just 7,100, right? Because on day 11, that's when there's a change. But day 1, day 2, day 3, up to day 10, no change. It's just 7,100, 7,100, 7,100, 7,100. Okay, so what we're going to end up with then, so that's for day 1 through 10. So that's 10 days, right? Because that's day 1 through 10 inclusive. So including day 1 and including day 10. So that's 10 days. And the balance is 7,100. Okay. Then there's a payment of 1,600. So that's going to be a decrease in the balance, right? So as far as what the outstanding or unpaid balance would be, when you pay, you're going to decrease how much you still owe, right? So you subtract the 1,600, you end up with 5,500. Okay. How many days are we at 5,500? 15. Because it's day 11, 12, 13, 14, through 25, but then the change happens on day 26. So then day 11 through 25, so that's 15 days. And then the balance is 5,500. And then lastly, it would be day 26 through 31, since it's October. So day 26 through 31. And then that's going to be 6 days, right? 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. So 6 days. And then the balance is 59.50 because there's been a purchase. A $450 purchase was made on day 26. So we're going to have a balance that's a little bit higher for those last 6 days. So in order to get the lengths of these intervals, I guess really you just have to get the first one right. That first one is just 10 days long, because then after that you could use the endpoints, right? Like day 25 minus day 10, that's 15, right? And then day 31 minus day 25, that's 6. And I guess another check is just that the 10 plus 15 plus 6 does add up to 31, and that is how many days are in October. So how do you compute the average daily balance? Well, it can't be that complicated because I didn't leave myself a ton of room here, and it's not. So the average, we've actually done the hard part already. So the average daily balance, so we're going to have 10 days where it's 7,100, so 10 times 7,100. Then we're going to have 15 days where it's 5,500, so 15 times 5,500. And then we're going to have 6 days where it's 59.50, so plus 6 times 59.50. And then there are 31 days in October, so we're going to divide by 31. So what you end up with here is, it's, let's see, 189,200 over 31, which is, and you have to round this one off, so I would round to the nearest cent here. So 6103.23. That's the average daily balance. All right, so that's essentially how that works. I put another one in here as well as the next example that just has one extra transaction in it. But otherwise, we're basically going to do the same thing. So if you look at what's there in number 2, it's month of June, right? So June, that's 30 days this time. So we're going to divide by 30 instead of 31. But if you look at what happens, it's kind of the same stuff, right? Even though it's different numbers and different transactions. But there's the carried forward amount of $14.50 from the end of May. Then there's a $200 purchase, which makes the balance go up. Then a $250 purchase, which also makes the balance go up. And then a $700 payment. Okay. So the first thing is if that first transaction happens on day 4, then on day 1 through 3, so everything before day 4, that's 3 days, and the balance is $14.50. Then we have day 4 through 16, right? So 4 through 16, you're going to have that balance after that $200 purchase. So 4 through 16 is 13 days. All right, 16 minus 3. And then the balance is going to be $16.50. Then there's another purchase on day 17. So day 17 through 22. So that's 6 days. And the balance is $1,900. And then lastly, it's going to be day 23 through 30. And that's going to be 8 days. All right, 30 minus 22. Or I guess you could count them, right? 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And then the balance would be $1,200. And then the average daily balance. All right, so we had 3 days where it was $14.50, so 3 times $14.50. Then 13 days where it was $16.50, so plus 13 times $16.50. Then 6 days where it's $1,900, and then 8 days where it's $1,200. And we're going to divide by 30 since we're in June. And what you get as an answer is $15.60. It divides evenly into a dollar amount. Because I used number 2 as a prop for number 3 later on the page, it's going to look like I got number 2 to work out this way on purpose. I didn't. I got lucky. It worked out. I had the whole thing written, and I thought, oh wow. When I went back and did them, it just happened to work out that way. So I would love to be like, oh yeah, I just set it up that way on purpose. I was hoping for it, but I did have to get lucky there. All right, so the interest, that's the next thing. And it's based on the average daily balance, right? The average daily balance is right over there. So we did have to go through the average daily balance first. But what the interest would be is it is based on that. And so you need that, and you need the interest rate. And you have to convert the interest rate to being a monthly rate. Because that's usually not what you're given, right? Usually what you're given as the interest rate is an APR, which is annual, right? It's the annual percentage rate. So if you're given an APR, you got to divide by 12. And that's what we're going to do. So with a monthly billing cycle, this is what you would do, and we're not going to have any other kind of billing cycle. So this is what we're going to do. All right, so example 2, if that has a monthly billing cycle where the owner of the credit card is billed in the first of each month, the APR is 15%. What's the total balance on July 1st? So at the end of that month of June that was there in number 2. All right, so we're going to need two things. We need the average daily balance, which we already have because we got it in number 2. And we're going to need the monthly interest rate. And then we'll be able to get the interest, and then we can just add that to the carried forward balance at the end of June. And that would be the bill at the beginning of July. All right, so let's see, the APR. So that's going to be 15%. And so that means that the monthly interest rate would be 15% over 12, which would be 1 3/12 or 1.25%, or 0.0125. Right? To do the math, we got to convert it into decimal form. Okay, so then the interest. So that'll be the monthly interest rate times the average daily balance. And okay, well then that'll be 0.0125 times the average daily balance of 1560. And we're going to get $19.50. Okay. Then the July 1st total balance, since that's the thing that we're ultimately supposed to get. So July 1st total balance, that would be the amount that's carried forward plus interest. And then the carried forward amount, that's the unpaid balance. I guess because I've done payroll before in a previous life, that I use the term carried forward for that. But anyway, carried forward, unpaid balance, same thing, which is actually there. If we go up, the unpaid balance would be the 1,200 because there's no other transaction in the month of June, right? So the balance is 1,200 on June 23rd. It's also 1,200 on June 30th because there's no other payment in there or other purchase in there. So, okay, well then that's 1,200. And then the interest was $19.50. So we should have 1219.50, and there's the answer. So getting the interest is really the work, right? Because after that, just to add it to that carried forward or unpaid balance amount, right? That's the easier part, right? The interest, you have to do the conversion, right? Just make sure you divide by 12 so it's monthly instead of annually. And since we already had the average daily balance, that was really helpful, right? Because then that's a big chunk of work that we didn't have to do. But that's how most of these questions are set up, actually. The ones where you have to get the total balance at the beginning of the next billing period in the homework, most of them give you the average daily balance, so they end up being pretty short. So that means number 4 is also going to be pretty short. So number 4, it says the average daily balance for the month of January was $740, and the unpaid balance at the end of the month was $815. And if the monthly interest rate is 1.8% of the average daily balance, then what is the total balance on the next billing date? Okay, so February 1st. A lot of them do give you the monthly interest rate too. So I wanted to have another one in here where you didn't actually have to divide by 12. So here you don't, right? It's just, that's the 1.8, that's exactly what you want. All right, so then the interest. So just like before, it's going to be the monthly interest rate times the average daily balance. Okay, so that's going to be, so 1.8%, that's 0.018. And then the average daily balance is 740, because it says so right at the beginning of that first sentence. And what you get is $13.32. Okay, so then the February 1st total balance, then that's going to be the unpaid balance plus interest. Okay, well, the unpaid balance at the end of the month was $815, and then the interest was $1332 that we just figured out. So the total balance is going to be $828.32, and that's it. And that's what a lot of these are like. When I ran through the homework repeatedly, this is how they were phrased. I guess just with different numbers and with different months, but other than that, pretty similar. And then for kind of a big finish, for number 5, I figured it was worth it to have one where we had to do the whole thing, where it's asking ultimately about the total balance at the beginning of the next month, but this is one where you actually have to do the computation of the average daily balance first. So number 5 is, it's like 1 and 2, followed by 3 and 4 together. All right. And just for fun, I made it a 29-day month. So the table below shows the transactions for a credit account during the month of February 2020, which is a leap year, so February is 29 days long. That's what that's getting at in the parentheses. And then if the account's APR is 16.8%, so we'll have to convert that into a monthly rate, and the owner of the account's billed on the first day of every month, what would be the total balance on March 1st? Okay. And if you look at this account, it looks like whoever has this account, they're just paying off their balance, right? They didn't buy anything, right? Payment, 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 just paying it down. All right, so the average daily balance, all right, let's see here. So day 1 through 5, so before that first payment, we've got 5 days, and we've got a balance of 3,000. Then day 6 through 15, that's 10 days, right? 15 minus 5, and then for those 10 days we have a balance of 2350, right? Because for those 10 days, that first payment has been made, but the second one hasn't been made yet. All right, then day 16 through 24. All right, that's 9 days. And for those 9 days, the balance is going to be 1950. And then day 25 through 29, since we're in February in a leap year, that's going to be 5 days. And for those 5 days, the balance is 1625, because on the 25th and later, all 3 of those payments have been made. All right, so we'll get the average daily balance, and then from there we can figure the interest out, and then we'll just about have it at that point. All right, so let's see, the average daily balance. All right, that's going to be 5 times 3,000 plus 10 times 2350 plus 9 times 1950, and then plus 5 times 1625. and that's all over 29. And what you get for the average daily balance, and this is one that you got to round off, which you would kind of expect, right? If you're dividing by 29, that's a weird divisor. You get 22, 12, 93. Oh, and one other thing with these. If you're going to put the whole thing in your calculator at once to get the average daily balance, so like if you have like a TI or something where you can put in a whole bunch of operations at the same time, just make sure you put the whole numerator in parentheses. Because otherwise the order of operations will not do the thing that you really want it to, right? So if you're going to put it all in at once, I don't do it like that even though I can. I just do the numerator by itself and then divide previous answer by 29 and then get whatever is there. But if you're going to do it all in one line, make sure that you put the numerator in parentheses. All right, so then once we got that, then we can get the interest. So, all right, for the interest computation, I guess the first thing is that we need to convert the interest rate. And it said, if I scroll up for a second, 16.8% APR. Okay, so 16.8% APR would mean that the monthly interest rate would be 16.8, lost the ability to draw, 0.8% divided by 12, which is 1.4% or 0.014. And then we can actually do the computation. So the interest will be the monthly rate times the average daily balance. And so that's going to be 0.014 times 2212.93, and what you get is $30.98 in interest when you multiply that out. Okay, so then the March 1st balance would be equal to the unpaid balance plus interest. And the unpaid balance, you can actually see it at the top of the screen right now, it's $16.25, right? Because after that third payment, it was $16.25 and there was never another payment after that. So right at the end of June, that's still what it's going to be. So I guess as June turns to July, it's still going to be $16.25. So $16.25 for the unpaid balance plus $30.98 in interest would be a balance at the beginning of July of $1655.98. All right, so with 5, that was one where we had to do the whole thing, right? Every single piece of what shows up in this section is in number 5. Because you got to get the average daily balance, you got to convert the interest rate to a monthly rate, and then figure out the interest, and then from there get the balance at the when the next bill comes out, basically. So I think if 5 makes sense, then the individual components, which is basically what 1, 2, 3, and 4 are, I think they'll make sense too. So that was the whole idea, at least for me, putting in the number 5 big finish with every single piece in it. So hopefully that works out. And as kind of a change of pace, the homework for this section does have some multiple choice questions that are just about terminology, which is a little bit different, but the material here kind of lends itself to that, right? There are a lot of terms that go along with credit cards. So there are going to be maybe 3 or 4 terminology questions thrown in along with the computational questions in this section.